If you saw Tunde that morning, you would have laughed. His shirt had many holes than buttons. His slippers were almost talking. His stomach sang a song of hunger, so loud even the goats turned to look. But when he said, "One day I will be rich enough to buy the whole market," the other boys laughed so hard they almost cried. Tunde just smiled. He didn't mind the laughter. In fact, he was used to it. People in Okeedo village had been laughing at him for as long as he could remember, laughing at his torn clothes, his big dreams, and his endless energy. But Tunde had a secret the rest of them didn't understand. He believed in hard work. Okeedo was a place where words were cheaper than groundnut shells. People could spend all day talking about what they would do if they had money. Yet, when the sun rose, they preferred sitting under mango trees to lifting a hoe. Tunde's mother, Mama Ireti, was different. She believed in hard work too. Maybe even more than Tunde. She sold vegetables in the market, but her stall was the smallest and most humble. Even then, she always told her son, "Tunde, we may be poor, but our hands are rich. Use them." The problem was Tunde's hands were willing, but there was hardly anything for them to work on. He was just 15, with no land of his own, no tools, and no money. But there was something in his heart that wouldn't let him stay idle. One hot Monday morning, as he passed by the big farm at the edge of the village, Tunde saw Mr. Ajala, the richest farmer in Okeedo, shouting at some workers, "Lazy fools! You eat my yam and then walk like snails. I will sack you all." The men just bowed their heads. Jobs were scarce, and no one wanted to be sent away. Tunde stood there watching until Mr. Ajala's eyes caught his. "You there, boy with the mosquito legs, can you walk?" "Yes, sir," Tunde shouted without thinking. The man raised an eyebrow. "Come tomorrow morning. If you are lazy, I will throw you out before the cock crows." The next day, Tunde arrived before sunrise. The air was still cool and dew clung to the leaves. Mr. Angela gave him a hoe that was almost taller than him and pointed to a large field. "Clear that by noon." It was impossible, but Tunde didn't argue. He started hacking at the stubborn weights. By the time the sun rose high, sweat poured down his back like a river. His arms ached, his palms burned, and his stomach growled in protest. Mr. Ajala walked past and sneered. Not completely useless. The words stung, but Tunde kept working. Day after day, he came back, planting maize, weeding cassava, feeding goats, fetching water. Sometimes he was paid with coins, sometimes with food, and sometimes with nothing but a bag. "You can go now." Even though Mr. Ajala was shrewd, Tunde paid attention. He learned how to plant seeds in straight lines, how to spot the best maize cobs, how to store yams so they won't rot. He noticed which buyers in the market paid more and which ones cheated. Most boys his age only saw farming as back-breaking labor. Tunde began to see it as a key that could open the door to the life he wanted. One afternoon, after carrying 2 heavy sacks of cassava to the market, Tunde passed a group of boys playing ayo under a mango tree. "Ah, farmer boy," one of them called. "When will you invite us to your mansion?" They laughed loudly, their white teeth flashing. Tunde just smiled and said, "When the harvest comes." They didn't understand. He wasn't joking. One evening, after finishing work at the farm, Tunde walked home slowly, thinking. His eyes fell on a patch of unused soil behind his mother's hut. The soil looked tired and dry, but it was land, and it was his, or at least his family's. He stood there for a long time, imagining rows of corn and vegetable growing tall and green. Mama Ireti came out of the hut, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "What are you staring at?" "Our future," Tunde said simply. That night, He couldn't sleep. His mind kept planting seeds in the small plots, watching them grow. He decided he would start, no matter how little he had. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. Instead of heading straight to Mr. Ajala's farm, he borrowed a hoe from an old neighbor. The metal head was rusty, but it could still break the ground. As he dug the ground, sweat ran into his eyes, but he kept going. Every strike of the hoe felt like a promise to himself. This is just the beginning. From then on, Tunde made a secret plan. Every time Mr. Ajala paid him, even if it's just 5 naira, he would keep a part of it in a tiny box under his bed. While other boys spent their coins on roasted corn, games, or cheap sweets, Tunde walked past the stalls without shopping. It wasn't easy. The smell of fresh akara in the morning almost broke his will more than once. Weeks turned into months, and his tiny box began to feel heavier. One day, he opened it and counted the money, enough to buy a handful of maize seeds and a few vegetable seedlings. It was early in the planting season when the first lights touched the horizon. Tunde rose quietly, washed his face in a bowl of cold water, and went behind the hut. He tilled the soil, making neat little rows just like he had seen Mr. Ajala do. He planted each maize seed carefully, covering it with the soil and patting it gently, almost like tucking a baby into bed. When he finished, he stood back and smiled. To anyone else, it looked like bare ground, but to Tunde, it was a field full of promise. Of course, it didn't take long before the news spread. Did you hear? That poor boy planted crops behind his house. What does he think? That small ground will make him a big man. Laughter followed him everywhere. But the more they laughed, the harder he worked. Tunde's eye became sharper than ever. Every day after school, he rushed to his little farm. He plucked weeds, chased away chickens, and watered the seedlings with an old calabash. Sometimes his mother would watch from the doorway and shake her head, not because she doubted him, but because she worried he was working too hard for too little. Tunde, she said one evening, don't wear yourself out. Rome wasn't built in a day. Yes, Mama, but it started one day, he replied. It was a bright morning when Tunde saw them, tiny green shoots, pushing through the soil like little soldiers. Standing at attention, he knelt down, smiling so wide it almost hurt his cheeks. Welcome, he whispered to them. From that day, he gathered those shoots as if they were gold. But nature is not always kind. 2 weeks later, a heavy storm swept through Okedo. The wind howled, the rain fell in angry sheets, and by morning, half of Tunde's small farm was damaged. He stood there in the mud, looking at the flattened plants. His chest felt heavy. For the first time, he wondered if the villagers had been right, but then he remembered his father's voice from years ago. Hard work doesn't fail unless you stop. So he didn't stop. The ground was dry, the seeds were few, and the sun was merciless. But Tunde dug, planted and watered like a soldier fighting a war. Every drop of sweat was a promise to himself. I will make it, no matter what. After the storm, Tunde's little farm looked like it had been through a battle. Bent maize stalks lay flat, and some vegetable seedlings had been washed away completely. For 2 days, he could barely eat, but on the third morning, he woke before dawn, tied his slippers tight, and went to the farm with a hoe in hand. He straightened the stalks that could be saved, replanted vegetables in the empty spaces, and built small ridges to stop water from flooding the plants again. Tunde's routine became a rhythm of hard work. Before school, he would water the plants, chase away goats, and pluck weeds. After school, work at Mr. Ajala's farm to earn more money. In the evening, he tends to his own crops again before it got dark. It was exhausting, but with every green leaf that appeared, his hope grew. Sometimes, as he walked, passersby would stop to watch. "See this boy," an old man would say. "He is farming like he owns a whole state." The younger boys still laughed at him, but now Tunde noticed something. Some of them laughed with curiosity in their eyes, not just mockery.
One afternoon, he returned from school so hungry, his stomach hurt. On the way home, he passed the akara seller. The smell was heavenly, and he still had 10 naira in his pocket from working at the big farm. For a moment, his hand reached for his pocket, but then he thought of the extra seeds and fertilizer he could buy with that money. He walked away. One Saturday morning, while Tunde was watering his crops, Mama Ireti came out with a small sack. "Here," she said, handing it to him. Inside were leftover vegetable seeds she had saved from her market stall. "Plant this too. The more you plant, the more you can harvest." Tunde grinned. "Thanks, Mama." By mid-season, his farm was no longer bare soil. Rows of maize stood tall, their leaves rustling in the wind. The vegetables grew in neat patches, green, fresh and healthy. Each day, the sight filled Tunde with energy, even when his body ached. Just when everything seemed perfect, another challenge came. One morning, he found part of his farm trampled. Footprints led away from the plant. Goats had sneaked in at night. For a moment, his hands trembled, but instead of shouting or crying, he built a stronger fence with sticks, rope, and thorny branches. Harvest time approached as week passed. The maize cob filled out and the vegetable became ready to sell. Tunde began talking to the market women, asking them the best days to bring produce and how to set prices. They were surprised at his seriousness. Finally, the day came. Tunde harvested a small basket of fresh vegetables and carried them to the market. The sun was hot, the streets noisy, but his heart beat fast with pride. By afternoon, the basket was empty. He counted his money slowly. It wasn't much, but it was his. When he got home, Mama Ireti hugged him tightly. "This is just the beginning," she whispered, and Tunde knew she was right. Money was in his pocket, but that wasn't the real reward. What Tunde had gained was bigger than naira. It was something no one could steal. After his first harvest, Tunde didn't waste time. He counted his earnings and used most of it to buy more seeds, better tools, and a bag of fertilizer. When Mama Ireti saw the empty tin box under his bed, she asked, "You are spending everything again?" Tunde smiled. "I'm planting my future, Mama." That season, Tunde rented a small piece of land from a neighbor. It wasn't much, just a little bigger than his mother's hut, but it meant more space to grow crops. He divided his time between school, the rented land, and his first small farm behind the house. His body ached every night, but each day he woke up with fresh energy. The same boys who once mocked him began to show up at his farm. "Tunde, can I help you water the plants?" "Tunde, how do you make the maize grow so tall?" Some were just curious, but others truly wanted to learn. By the end of the season, Tunde's maize was tall, healthy, and golden. His vegetables filled baskets. He hired two of the boys to help him carry the produce to the market. That day, he didn't just sell out. The buyers argued over his goods because they were fresher than anyone else's. When he counted his earnings, it was more than he had ever held in his life. Instead of spending all the money on himself, he used part of it to buy sandals for his helpers, pay their wages, and even help one boy buy school books. The same mouth that once mocked him now praised him. Months later, the village council invited Tunde to speak at a youth meeting.
Standing in front of a small crowd, he said, "Hard work is like farming. The seed is your effort, the soil is your time, and the harvest is your reward. If you don't plant, you can't reap." His voice shook a little, but the applause that followed was loud and warm. With the next harvest profits, Tunde cleared parts of his rented land and invited interested youths to learn farming for free. He showed them how to plant, water, protect, and harvest. Some laughed and left, but others stayed, and slowly more people joined. Years passed, and Tunde's small farms became bigger. He bought land of his own and employed workers, but he never stopped teaching. One evening, as the sun set behind tall maize stalks, Mama Ireti stood beside him. "You've done well, my son. You've planted more than crops. You've planted hope." Tunde smiled, watching the young farmers at work. "Mama," he said softly, "this is the real harvest."